Um, Good morning, everybody. We're gonna slowly start. We're gonna wait for a few minutes for that last people can join us. So I'm very happy to be here with you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will be discussing biodiversity, the topic. It's a very, very important topic. If you follow the first session in the plenary, it's actually like it changed a lot like over the years because we are now talking about the planet, the environment. It's not just climate, it's not just carbon. So I'm Arthur Campredon. I work at CDC Biodiversité. I'm a director of footprint measurement, so I'm in charge of the development of a biodiversity footprinting tool that we develop. It's called the Global Biodiversity Score, and we are working every day on the topic and trying to make the change we need on biodiversity. So I'm joined with great panelists today to discuss an interesting debate, so how to halt biodiversity loss. So it's a big question. We'll try to answer as structured as possible today. Perhaps a few words to introduce a bit like the debate, why it is important to discuss this today, and why it is key that we try to set up the great credible targets to reach our objective at the global level. So we are now 2 years after the adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is very the objective that we must go to. It's the equivalent of the Accord de Paris for biodiversity. It has objective, it has targets, it has all the framework that we need to get there. So we are now talking about implementation. We are a few weeks, perhaps 2 weeks after COP16 now, so the first COP that really talks about how to implement this GBF, how do we translate this accord, this objective, into concrete actions, into something that is actionable for companies, actionable for government, actionable for NGOs, something that really, build trajectories, same as climate, same as what we did after the Accord de Paris, to translate this 1.5 degrees objective into concrete targets for climate. We are in the same moment. It's a bit more complex, but not that complex for biodiversity. We have a lot of metrics, we have a lot of indicators, we have a lot of vocabulary now that will help you, companies, financial institutions, NGOs, consultancy, to all together try to set up a framework so we can get to this point, so we can get to the same vocabulary. So we have, carbon budget. It's a very big question for climate. We can have also biodiversity budget. It's the same, depending on the indicator, the metric that we use. For example, at CDC Biodiversity, we use the MSA, so it's a global metric. So we can talk about like MSA budget, for example. And then you have all the same debates. You have like trajectories, sectoral effort, all what we did on climate. We can do the same biodiversity, and we'll try to discuss this today. We have a focus today also. We are going to be focusing on two sectors that are key for the transition, the agricultural sector and the mining sector, the extractive. These two sectors are very key. It's the same a bit as energy for climate, to make you think about this. It's like very impactful sector, but very key to the transition. It's very key because all the change that we make on the mining side, on the field, will have consequences on biodiversity directly. And they are part of the value chain of, I don't have a percentage, but a big number of companies on financial institutions. When you talk about scope, it's in the scope 3 of a lot of companies and financial institutions. So we have to, depending on the position of the value chain, deal with the topic, try to set up credible targets, try to engage, if you are a financial institution, with the company you invest in. All these things that we need to do, and we're going to be discussing today. So, this is it for me. So I'm joined with, like, as I said, 4 great panelists. So first, Sarah Lockwood from Danone. You are Global Regenerative Agriculture Director. So thank you for being here with us. We also have you, Frédéric Desmoulins. You are Biodiversity and Water Coordinator at Eramet, so also directly involved into the discussion that we have. We also have you, thank you, Laure Villepé. You are Head of Sustainability Strategy and Development at Tikeo Capital, so we'll have a view of the financial institutions on this. And we also have you, thank you, Grant Rugley, Technical Director United Finance at TBC, the biodiversity consultancy. We were here 2 years ago at the Natixis Green Hub Summit discussing a bit the same, so we advance now, and we'll try to discuss this today with you all. So I'm going to jump directly to two questions, starting with you, Sarah and Frédéric. Perhaps you, Sarah, you're going to start. A question on this sectoral question. So, as I said, agriculture and mining are very impactful. The major driver of biodiversity loss. What are, to you, the main levers to halt biodiversity loss in this, and respective of the position in the value chain, of course, and how to engage with them particularly on this topic? Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm going to speak from the lens of the procurement because I'm based in the procurement department in Danone and I'm in charge of Rajanak there. Maybe before jumping into the levers, just to remind, because I'm not sure everyone is aware, Danone is mostly known for the dairy activity. So we do source a lot of milk and we produce yogurts. And we source directly from many farms, like 65,000 farms across the world. But we also have a plant-based activity, and we also do food for babies or medical nutrition, which means that we also source a lot of crops across the world: soy, almond, oat, fruits, vegetables, etc. So just to tell you, and sometimes not even directly, not always directly, but through intermediates. I'm specifying this because it's going to come in the conversation afterwards on how we deal with biodiversity. Oops. So in terms of levers, maybe it's to go back to the pressure first. When we look at the pressure that our activity, our agricultural supply chain is putting on the earth, mostly is first the land conversion, the ecosystem degradation. That's one. The second would be the pollution, for instance. Then you have everything linked to resource depletion, water use in particular. But you also have something linked to monoculture and the lack of cultivated biodiversity. So I'm going back to this because then I can then list why the levers I'm going to mention are relevant for us. And there are three levers, a type of levers. One is technical, another one is socio-economic, and the last one more institutional. In terms of technical, the first one we're looking at is tackling land conversion and deforestation. So that there's a political agenda around that, especially in Europe with EUDR, but it's really something also we have in our policy to tackle this topic of conversion of land. A second topic is to improve our efficiency. So how can we be better at what we do? And for instance, the resources that we use. I'm going to take a very concrete case. If we use water in agriculture, in the case where agriculture is irrigated, is how we make sure that to produce the same amount of products, we can reduce the amount of inputs. We can reduce the amount of water we use on farm. So that calls for more efficiency, that calls for technicity, that calls for some innovation as well and technology. But that alone is not enough. And we really need, if we want to be able to tackle biodiversity loss or the whole nature topic, to go back to our relationship with nature. And we heard it this morning. So it's how we can partner with nature, how we can reconsider how investing in nature is a critical driver at the service of performance, resilience, and low-carbon farms eventually. And so to give you an example, if I go back to the example of water, we have a lot of farms there are some farms that are irrigated, some farms that are not, they're rain-fed. And some farms, we want to reduce the amount of water, for irrigation. A lever we can mobilize is how we work on the soil health. We have fantastic tools right under our feet. We heard this morning. The soil can help us store water if we take care of it. It means that just by restoring these natural cycles, the nutrient cycle, the water cycles, for instance, the carbon cycles, we can really boost the contribution of nature to then agricultural production, helping us then with all the co-benefits we talked about in terms of food sovereignty, etc. And so really this lever is critical for us, how we rework with nature, putting first regenerative agriculture to restore the cycles. So that's really environment. And socio-economic, it's because we would not be able to do anything of that if we were not working together with farmers and suppliers and making added value for them. Maybe we can come back to that afterwards. And the third one, of course, is more institutional, how we make sure that public-private policies are, financing is aligned, how we make sure the public policies are aligned also with the private sector initiative, how we can work together on public-private partnerships.
Thank you so much. Very, very, very interesting. Perhaps just one tiny question for you is just how do you, because you talked a lot about agricultural regenerative, it's very key for the transition. It's very key to what we call to bend the curve, or to reverse the trend into biodiversity, because it's much more effort than climate. We're just not hearing only about like pressure reductions. At some point, in the end, we also have to regenerate. It's very key. And so we have this example of regenerative agriculture, how it is taken up by like your executive director at Danone. How do they consider it, and how far they are ready to go in their value chain to change their business model?
That's a very good question. So first of all, it challenges our strategy, right? The way we're thinking about agriculture and the way we source our agricultural ingredients. So really it puts nature alongside climate as a priority for the company. And the question is, how do we make that tangible enough, and how we embed that in our business across all the functions in the companies? It cannot just be kind of a cherry on the cake for the CSR department. It doesn't work anymore. If we want to have an impact in the field, it must be integrated to the procurement targets. It must be one of the opportunities that are perceived by marketing and sales departments if we want to have that embedded in the company. And maybe that is, so more institutionally as a company, what we decided is to also embed these regenerative agriculture targets as part of our entreprise à mission status. So we have entreprise à mission status as Danone, and alongside the climate objective, we do have a regenerative agriculture deployment objective. And this is really dear to us because it helps us keep that North Star, it's kind of a long-term vision, and make sure that despite the fluctuation of the market, despite inflation, everything we can see as procurement challenges, we have that still as a vision.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Very interesting. Turning to you now, Frédéric, bit the same questions. How do you, at Eramet, deal with the subject? What are the main levers to halt and reverse biodiversity loss?
So maybe just a word to introduce Eramet. Eramet is a French mining company with an international position. We have a mining operation in 4 different countries. To give you an idea about the size, we are 11,000 workers inside Eramet. And what has been very strategic within Eramet is to position ourselves on the green metals, on the metals of the green transition. And of course, as we are at the very initial steps of the value chain, we have major impacts, and we have also some issue regarding credibility. And what we wanted to do is to move and adopt a standard with a good practice that is recognized as good practice, and standards that was made by coalitions of different stakeholders, of unions, of representatives of local communities, of financing institutions, other mining, also buyers of mining and metals. This international standard is named IRMA for International Responsible Mining Assurance. There is an initial standard that has been issued a few years ago already, and that is being updated right now. What we have decided is so to adopt that standard into our operation of mines, and to get auditing, to have audit start in all our 5 sites. For and within the 3 next years. So this standards is giving, of course, transparency. The idea is to engage with stakeholders, and the process is also including third-party audit and discussion with the different stakeholders locally, and they give their view on the way we operate in the different sites. And this means also change in the practice, in the way of doing mining on the day-to-day. It means we were talking about biodiversity, so it means also changing the way to assess biodiversity. Within IRMA, what is referring to for biodiversity is the IFC Performance Standard 6, which last version has been issued in 2012, and with most recent renewal of the guidance. What is inside the standards? So it's a new way of assessing. Like you need to go not only on the ground to do an inventory of species that are present, but the idea is to go for an assessment of the habitats, of the ecosystems. So it means to map natural and modified habitats, it means to assess critical habitats, and it means to adopt a quantitative approach. So mitigation hierarchy is still at the heart of the process, but what we need to do on our sites now is to really quantify the losses and gains and to show that the balance at the end with avoidance measure, mitigation measure, offset measure, we have a balance which is zero or even positive. So it also means that in the organizations there is also some adaptation and some change with a dedicated person to biodiversity. At the moment we have up to three people fully dedicated to biodiversity to run this change. Of course we are also having some consultants that are helping us in this transition. We also have some local specialists. We also involve stakeholders at local level to have the good understanding at the territory level. And these people that we're having on site, we have also the ambitions to build capacity to strengthen the skills in biodiversity. So it means also training of these people. It means meetings. We're meeting like 3 times a year at least to discuss about lesson learned, about good practices, to discuss also about international expectation, and this GBF is part of it. And so it means a different change in adaptation at different levels, strategic, also in the ground, in the organizations. And we're also having, of course, some committee to look at the progress we're doing on our roadmap on biodiversity. We have a CSR steering committee that is having the advantage of looking either on the water topics, on social topics, on climate change in addition to biodiversity.
Thank you. That's quite a complete picture. With regard to Eramet, perhaps also one tiny question. What is the key driver of your consideration about biodiversity? Is like you have perhaps a lot of risk aspect or regulatory, or is that like the drivers from investors that will make the link after with the second part? What is the main driver of your efforts to drive change into Eramet?
So you mentioned the kind of tool that you're developing with the biodiversity print. We did not do the biodiversity footprint with you, but we did also that confirm that the impacts we're having are on mining operation. We had like 80% that are really derived by mining operation and is directly connected with land use. So it means a lot of efforts on this land use and land use transformations. So in the keynotes we were talking about investing in soil and less in minerals. I would say you can do both with investing in mining, the idea and the things that we are progressing on also and investing on is also research and innovations. And the way we are doing is we want to improve the way we are doing restoration at mine. And the idea is also to go for new techniques. So we are investing a lot on this land use, which is the main pressure we're having on mines.
Thank you so much, Frédéric. I'm now turning to you, Laure and Grant. Perhaps, Laure, you first. We heard the two stories of two main companies, two major companies, how difficult it is to engage in the transition, but how necessary it is for them and for the whole biodiversity strategy. What about your role, Laure, as an investor? What is your role as an investor with regard to biodiversity loss? How do you consider your impact in terms of investing into companies? And what way can you engage with them? Because we heard the stories. They do a lot, but it's not as harmonized and has structures as for climate. We don't have to follow like a concrete trajectory in terms of CO2 equivalent. It's a bit more difficult. You have a lot of metrics. It's not that easy. But how do you do that, and how it is important for the biodiversity transition for you to engage with them?
Hi everyone, really happy to be here today. So at Tikeo Capital, we are an asset manager and we mostly focus on private assets. So not investing directly in listed companies, but investing mostly in private debt, private equity, as well as real estate, and we have some listed strategies. And so meaning, we can really engage with the company in which we invest, in the sense that we have a direct link to them, and when it comes to real estate assets here, we can also, directly manage the assets. Just, I should really be humble today, because yes, Tikeo Capital has launched a regenerative agriculture strategy. However, as of today, we have only one investment. So, yes, we have this fund. We are really willing. We have this vision that we can be innovative. At Tikeo, there is a motto, it's create, don't compete. So we partnered with AXA and AXA Climate and Unilever to launch this fund. And we are training the teams. We have been, to the farm. We have AXA Climate delivering training on a monthly basis, so that we are learning about the issues in Regenag, and then really trying to identify companies that will deliver both impact and competitive financial returns. And so it's much more work. It's really hard. I mean, a number of asset managers are also working on biodiversity, but we really have an ecosystem that can support us. Here I see some investors that are, challenging us. Our limited partners who invest in the fund are challenging us on what are the objectives of the strategy and how we can deliver impact. So on a daily basis, how do we work, because we have this vision that, yes, finance is a catalyst. We need to accompany company and finance the decarbonization, but we also want, to have an impact on biodiversity. So what does it mean to us? This regenerative agriculture fund wants that for every opportunity in which we invest, there is at least one positive impact, either on carbon, on the soil regeneration, on water. You mentioned the need to reduce irrigation, or biodiversity, here I will come back to it, or on social or health metrics. And then we need to make sure that there is no negative impact on other objectives if they are not already met by the strategy. So yeah, maybe I'll come back later to the impact. But so really that we have this theory of change, and then for every opportunity, AXA Climate will perform an enhanced impact due diligence, and then there is an impact committee, that will assess and challenge the opportunities, and that's why as of today we have only one opportunity, because the impact committee is pretty strict, but that's how we ensure that we are delivering both on the impact and financial returns.
Thank you very much, very interesting. Also, perhaps a tiny question for you is, when we are an investor, in financial institutions, there's two ways to address biodiversity. Either you try to invest in nature solutions, something that is very positive, as you mentioned, for biodiversity, for the planet. Either you also try to make the company you invest in go for a transition. It's the same as climate, trying them to reduce their emission, etc., etc., etc. And the biodiversity is the same topic, and so you address at Tikeo Capital the first one, a bit like the nature positive, as I said. Perhaps if you have any views on these transition patterns, how do you engage with the company that has impact, but how to make them transition to reduce their impact?
Yeah, so I think for most of our impact funds, actually, we do both. And even when you invest in solutions, for example, in our decarb fund, we invested in Green Yellow. They developed solar farms on top of parking lots, as well as energy efficiency solution, but they had not looked at their own decarbonization strategy. So I think even in solution, there is always some transition, and that's the case for the first investment of this regenerative agriculture fund. So we invested in BioFirst. It's a leading company in integrated biological pest and disease controls, as well as bumblebee pollination for high value crops, such as berries, for example. And even though this company was focusing on biological control, as at today, they also offer traditional pesticides. So here, the transition angle is that in the impact plan of the company, we will reduce the share of traditional inputs and really focus on the biological solution. And here, our view is that if you want to be able to scale impact, you need to also accompany the transition, because if you look at actually the farmers that are buying from this biofirst company, they need both as at today. They cannot only live with biocontrols or only in certain farms. So that's why we are ready to accompany the transition even for impact funds. But then, of course, we need to measure the harm, and that's what we do with AXA Climate. So we need some specialists.
Thank you. Turning to you now, Grant, as a consultant, how do you see yourself? What position you should have in terms of engagement, accompanying these financial institutions to then engage with their investees?
Yeah, thanks, Arthur. So just as a point of clarification, I'd like to, if I can, have just a straw poll in the room. Who in this room is new to the biodiversity topic, and who in this room has been working on it for a little while? So new to the biodiversity topic? Okay, that is kind of what I'd think. I think that it's wonderful. I see quite a few familiar faces, but I think again, we're in this space of needing to get more people to pay attention to what we're doing, and to integrate what we're doing into existing investment strategies, existing engagement, existing work on climate. So I just think starting there, what I would say is that we need to acknowledge this context of the pushback that inevitably there will be from the front office in a bank, from the deal team, from whoever, in engaging corporates or developing new strategies. There's limited time. So as a result, you asked me a question about engagement and engaging to halt and reverse nature loss. We need to be thinking about prioritization. So prioritizing those engagements where the impact can be reduced to the greatest extent, where the harm can be avoided, that really needs to be avoided. So we need to acknowledge that context, that also at the end of an engagement, what are we going to look to do as a financial institution, or as a buyer of a commodity, or as a developer of projects? We're going to be doing something that's going to cost us money, probably, because we'll need to incentivize in the short term the company to transition, or we might need to exit the client and cause lots of friction with the portfolio company. These things are hard, right? So again, we want to prioritize the companies, the locations, the activities that are the most harmful, or where the biggest delta for improvement can be. So focusing on that prioritization of engagement, first of all, following the TNFD guidance, we need to be prioritizing sensitive locations. So we need to, and we need to be prioritizing activities that have, the greatest impact. So we do need, wherever possible, location-specific information from portfolio companies, from assets, about where the mine sites are, about where the commodities are being produced, the agricultural commodities, and then mapping those over where key biodiversity areas are. Are they near World Heritage sites? And in essence, utilizing that as a first step to prioritizing the engagement. And then when it comes to the engagement itself, a way to structure that, we've heard the mitigation hierarchy mentioned already. So focusing first of all on how is the miner avoiding harm? So to give a super tangible example, how is the mining company in Chile avoiding arsenic pollution from the copper mining leaching into the water supply, which is super material because there's not enough water and we're running out of water in Chile. So we need to, if that's not being avoided and managed already, then it needs to be. So we need to then use the mitigation hierarchy to prioritize the engagement and avoid harm. First of all, we need to be avoiding harm before we're trying to reduce it or before we're trying to restore. So do less bad. And then in addition to prioritizing based on that, we also need to try and bring in the lens of financial materiality. So prioritizing engagement where if action is not taken, the financial consequence will be significant. just to make it real, let's say that you have identified that you have a mining company in your portfolio or a project that you're looking to finance that's in Chile, that's copper mining. Well, again, unless the water supply and the engagement between that company and the local government is good, we have a serious problem with access to water in those areas within 10 years. Some would say within 5 years. So it's super financially material. So again, prioritizing engagement based on that. Once you've done all those things, you can then actually talk about the content of the engagement. So again, just to use the tangible example, the arsenic, you'd be talking about acid mine drainage, you'd be talking about neutralizing the waste before it exited the mine. Earlier on, IFC Performance Standard 6 was mentioned, which is a standard that it was our pleasure as a consultancy to help be the architects of back in it was last iterated recently, but back in 2012. Those performance standards and any certification that you've ever heard about aluminium or palm oil or soy, they all contain extremely excellent guidance about what good looks like and what not so good looks like when it comes to producing those commodities, when it comes to those extracting those commodities. So a really, really simple takeaway for you all is that if somebody is saying to you, well, I'm not really sure what the content of an engagement would be or what we need to focus on in terms of the questions to ask, et cetera, just look into those certification standards. Just look at what others like CDP plug into their forest score methodologies. All the questions and all the knowledge is already there, which kind of leads me to my last point, which is that you can do all the exposure assessment and prioritization that you like to prioritize where the attention and the focus goes, and tools such as what artist companies produce can help you with that. It doesn't mean that you can't take action now. It doesn't mean that we don't already know what the most important issues are. So for example, any major financial institution that doesn't have a robust approach to deforestation, it doesn't make any sense, because we already know that that's one of the biggest drivers of nature loss and one of the biggest contributors to climate change. So that's that, you can take action now. So yes, just wanted to acknowledge, super important to prioritize. We've heard from those what they're already doing, but yeah, you can do things now.
Thank you, Grant. Also, one question for you. So we have the global picture, so we know what to do. But from your perspective, from your experience working with financial institutions, how far they are implementing it right now? What do they miss? And how to help them to reach that level of having this global picture? Sorry, hard question.
So it goes in cycles. For the past year or two, financial institutions were mostly asking us to answer the question of how. Like, how do we know where our biggest impacts are? How do we mitigate them? How do we manage them? How do we measure it? How do we set a baseline? They're still asking those questions. We've got targets as a thing behind us, like what target could a financial institution set, and I think we'll get there. But the question is changing from how to why again, mostly. And I think that's because of the wider context that we have politically, and because we have an enduring situation that will continue to endure with interest rates that is putting a lot of strain on client and financial institution returns. And it means that they need to keep making the case for why focus on biodiversity loss. So I think to return to your question, I think that we really need to do a better job as a community, and those of you in this room seem to all already be engaged in this topic. I think that we do need to be focusing as a community on developing more forward-looking scenarios of the consequences financially of nature loss. It's still a way too big a gap. We need more scenarios about what it means if the water basins are overexploited in certain parts of the world. We need more scenarios about what it means when you have pollinator collapses within certain ecosystems. We need more about what it means if you go over tipping points with regards to deforestation. So yeah, I think we need to do more on the why, and that question is getting asked more often as the agenda on nature, it's not going away, but as it gets squeezed.
Thank you, because it's indeed, I'm completely share your view, because it's hard to, and even for scientists, to say what is exactly and where is the tipping point. So where are we gonna all collapse as a society when we impact too much biodiversity? So we're now switching a bit the debate on. So we talked about the transition, the necessary transition from these two sectors in particularly, and everyone has a role to play, as you can see. Switching on a bit to like how to measure, how to follow, how to track. I'm starting now with you both, perhaps starting with you now, Frédéric. How do you measure at Eramet? How do you measure your impacts? What the type of metrics, indicators you are taking into consideration? Is it something related to impact? Is it something more related to pressures? We heard the two terms before in the first round of discussions. Or it's more related to like localized projects, saying, okay, I'm going to invest into like this project that is very positive for biodiversity. And how do you translate these indicators and these metrics potentially into actions and in the end?
So yeah, many tools, many metrics, and I think that as many other companies within Eramet, we're using a lot of tools for different purposes. And so we were talking about the biodiversity footprint. So this was an excellent, and it is an excellent tool to measure the impacts on the pressures for the whole value chain. And we did the evaluation across scope 1, 2, and upstreams scope 3. So it's giving metrics in MSA kilometer square. I mentioned also that we are doing other things on sites. We want to demonstrate a balance in between losses and gains, and to reach the zero or even positive contributions. Here we're having a habitat approach. So we are looking at what impact we're having on the habitat, or what gain in restoring or in offsetting we're having on habitat. So here we go with metrics that are named habitat equivalent, or quality hectares, or quality habitats. And here it's already, we're about talking about the same thing. We're talking about footprint, and we see that we have different metrics, and that it's not an easy task, and we did not succeed yet in compiling all this information that is coming from site at corporate level to aggregate all that information. And it means also other tools that many others can use also, that are from global database based on GIS information. Maybe the most famous was is IBAT. So we're using IBAT with using other also database that give information on carbon sequestration, forest erosion, many things like this that give also information. Like when you want to go for a pre-diagnosis of the biodiversity value in a new area, it can also give you a trend of the evolutions of the quality of the habitats over the last years that has been covered. We also have tools when we do works on field to see if the actions has been effectively implemented, if it is giving efficient results, to be able to do corrective actions afterwards. So it's many tools. It's tools that are used for different purpose. And I will not be complete if I do not talk about the CSRD and the reporting, with also other indicators, maybe ones that we are not used to deal with up to now. We were reporting about our actions, about what we're doing on the field. Now it's another approach with a more holistic approach over the corporate activities, and also information about the risks and opportunities associated with biodiversity within the group. So it's another step, and we still have to use that tools of reporting to also evolve our actions on the ground.
you, because that was quite a complete story on effectively like the localization part with IBAT. You mentioned it, so it's how you close to a key biodiversity areas or specifically endangered species, and then also the evaluation part, which is like what is their impact on scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, and these two combined can also drive risk analysis for CSRD, for TNFD reporting. The TNFD reporting is structured this way. You have the LEAP process, so LEAP, and the LEAP, the L is for localize, E for evaluation, so more impact, extra. So everything is starting to be a bit structured on the process. The thing we lack now is exactly what you mentioned, is how to make a link with like on-the-ground data, field data that's also be feeding these indicators, these metrics, to have finally India in a global picture. And so it's very key to go in that direction. Turning to you, Sarah, same question. How are you dealing with this metric indicator topic at Danone?
Thanks. Well, first is to go back to what we're trying to get done in the field. So that measurement is at the service of action and the impact there with the farmers and the suppliers. And so when we're like what we're trying to get done, we're looking at what a holistic approach, something systemic. Yet it doesn't mean that we should not be intentional and really focus on what matters. So a first layer would be, okay, we want to improve overall the state of nature. What do we need to do where to make it happen as efficiently as we can? And so the first layer in the measurement would be the materiality analysis. Then the question is, it also challenged the question of scale. Often we feel like we have a global footprint. Okay, but no, we don't have a global footprint. We have a multi-local footprint. Now we can't just say we have a corporate target. We actually need to go down to the river basin, to the sourcing shed. And this is where things happen, where we identify the right materiality, where we need to look at the right metrics, so that is relevant for the farmers, the ingredients, the project we're trying to put in place. And so our way to do so is that we've been working for the past 2 years on with a coalition. So it's also part of the tension when you're mentioning, oh, what did it change in the company? It also changed our idea of, can we just do it and measure it alone, or do we actually need to move to pre-competitive now? And this is really a key shift now in our way to look at agriculture and procurement. So we've been working with the SAI initiative. Don't know if you guys know this coalition. It's called Sustainable Agriculture Initiative, and we've been working together with other food and agri players on a common reporting framework for agriculture, for regenerative agriculture. And there the idea is to say we want to improve a number of impact areas, climate, soil health, biodiversity, water, so nature overall. How do we get there? And how do we measure this impact as much as we can locally? And in Danone, it creates a shift because we were used more to look at practices and just track, like record what practices farmers were putting in place. And that would help us by some sort of causality feel like, yes, we're going in the right direction. That being said, now we feel we really need to move to actual measurement, but that won't be done from a day to another. There are things that are ready, like carbon, with a long track record of how we do that and how we measure, although the carbon sequestration in soil is still in question. But for biodiversity itself, it's still not that easy, especially in different contexts, etc. So at Danone, we're still exploring how to do that the most effectively possible, efficiently possible, and in a relevant way. I think I'm there. Yeah, and so maybe the question on the measurement also for us is then, if we want to keep that relevance, it's not just about measuring, it's then how do you set credible scientific-based targets? So we've been piloting the SBTN framework in Alsace for soy, for instance, to start and think, okay, how can we inject this idea of planetary boundaries in our program? Because yes, you can measure, you can track KPIs, but how do you make sure that you go the right way and what is good enough? So that's what we're also exploring as we speak. And last, it's how then you are able to cascade up these multi-local monitoring and into one credible corporate target, which is very tricky, because then it means that maybe in Alsace you'll be looking at water pollution, maybe in Spain you'll be looking at water consumption. If you just get that directly as a corporate, maybe your objective doesn't look that fancy, because you would have like, 20% reduction of my footprint, and people would be like, only? Yeah, but maybe it's 80% why it actually matters. So that's also the translation that we need to operate as a company.
Thank you, because indeed we will need in the end some thresholds, some very like big numbers, trajectories at the international level to make sure that we are on the track and we are respecting our objective. In terms of the GBF, we mentioned it. You mentioned also the planetary boundaries. It's also another key element, how to make sure that we measure and we are on track for this. I'm turning to you, Laure, as an investor. So how do you integrate this biodiversity strategy, this biodiversity measurement into your investment thesis, and how do you make sure the different measurement approach that the investees companies will have are integrating in your strategy, and how do you harmonize and structure your measurement strategy at financial institution level?
So when it comes to biodiversity, we have only one indicator that is used across all strategies, and it's really the distance of the company sites from sensitive, critical areas, natural parks, because that's a key indicator of negative externalities. So that's the only one we measure across the board. Then, as Grant said, we must focus on, measuring biodiversity where it matters. So we focus on sectors such as real estate, infrastructure, as well as reg and ag. And I will come back to agriculture. So on real estate assets, actually, we looked at the data that was available to us, and we managed circa 10 billion euro in real estate assets. And actually, we only collect the share of green space on our real estate assets for 20% of our assets. So here, first, it's really acknowledging we must understand where are our impacts, we must measure, and then launching an action plan to actually collect the data. And then when it comes to real estate, we know the objective is zero net artificialization. We have not yet taken this objective publicly because, again, we cannot yet measure. But of course, we know where to look at when it comes to real estate assets. And I think something very powerful with infrastructure and real estate is that we can mandate ecological studies. So we have one real estate impact fund, and for such fund, for every project there is a study, and then we must demonstrate that during the investment lifetime we have improved the biodiversity, green space, but then all different indicators depending on the sites, because as we saw, it's really at a local level that we must analyze the various plants and species. So that's for real estate. So coming back to regenerative agriculture, so a bit more about the fund. So I mentioned that we could invest in inputs such as biocontrols. We can also invest in equipment and machinery. We can invest in outputs or ingredients. So ensuring that throughout the supply chain, we have the regional farm up to the user. And finally, we can also invest in what we call transversal enablers, such as impact measurement tools or knowledge sharing tools. So of course, the impact indicators will depend from the type of product and services. And here, what is really key to us is that all these indicators are very practical. Because a share of our carried interest, so it's if our financial performance reach a certain threshold, we are entitled to have an additional return, and this return is also linked to impact KPIs. And so, therefore, we must make sure that we can measure on an annual basis, the KPIs. So coming back to this BioFirst company and this biocontrol specialist, here, of course, we thought about avoided carbon emission through the use of the product, but here that would mean we would have need to have the life cycle analysis for the key products, which we didn't have. Then we look at water savings or a number of other metrics, but they were actually not available. So in the end, we decided to go for the amount of surface covered by the biocontrols. So it's very basic, maybe a bit disappointing, but that's for the first year. And then as time goes, we will mandate LCAs, we will conduct this, and maybe we will come with more powerful indicators, and maybe at some point to the mean species type of integrated KPIs, but that's not possible at this stage. So we remain really pragmatic, because here, really there must be also a link between the business plan and the impact plan. Otherwise, we cannot demonstrate that we seek both. So it's a bit tough, but that's what we have decided for now. And it's not that simple, because when you look at the surface, actually the effects are not the same if we are in a greenhouse or if you are in open fields. So you need still to consider some specificities, and that's why we are happy to have AXA Climate supporting us in every analysis, as it's not something that we could have done internally yet.
Thank you, Laure. And finally, turning to you again, Grant. You have a different position. You are compiling financial institutions, basically. What are your key recommendations in terms of impact measurement or measurement in general? What kind of indicators would you recommend them to follow, etc., etc.?
Another easy question. Thanks, Arthur. So, how are we on time? Just time check. I'm looking at Graciana. Yeah, 5. All right, cool. So 5 minutes to answer how financial institutions can measure progress, set targets. So I think that what we've heard from the other panelists is more focused on what we'd call like an outcome type measurement or an outcome metric. So what actually is happening on the ground with regards to the biodiversity, or you mentioned quality hectares, which is a pretty commonly used metric to understand the extent of the habitat that's been affected. So what I'll do is maybe less, rather than focusing on outcome-based metrics, I'll focus more on pressure-based metrics, which are more applicable to the larger financial institutions that need to try and do this for their whole balance sheet, for all of their strategies. So actually, just very quickly, outcome-based metrics, so there's something called the Nature Positive Initiative, which is a collective of 27 organizations that are right now establishing consensus state of nature metrics. So those are how do you measure the outcomes for nature, positive or negative? So at this very moment, that is out for consultation, or the consultation just finished. So that will establish a consensus way of measuring the outcomes for nature. We are really proud to contribute to that, but we went from like 400 metrics to like around 12 indicators. So it was a very exhausting and exhaustive process. But that's on the outcome side. So on the pressure side, what to do? And I think that the key phrase to have in your head is what the contribution to nature positive can be, what the contribution to nature positive can be claimed. And we've spoken a little bit about those 5 pressures on nature, the 5 drivers of nature loss that we need to halt and reverse, climate being one of them. So the most famous pressure-based metric for a portfolio is financed emissions. It's an aggregated pressure metric indicating the pressure that increased GHG is placing upon the climate. And then the outcome would be the global temperature change. So what are the other pressure-based metrics for the other pressures? So invasive species, you can have metrics around the introduction of invasive species per year. So the Global Biodiversity Framework is very instructive on this and says we need to be reducing that by around 50% for the most relevant sectors and activities. Under pollution, nutrients, like amount of nitrogen that key sectors use per year, again, the GBF is instructive. We're looking to reduce excess nutrient usage by more than 50%. So that Global Biodiversity Framework can roll down to a pressure-based metric. What does that mean for a financial institution? Well, they can kind of, this is aside from getting asked why should we do this again, which is fun, the other big question that, say, the CSO is asking, or the head of the head of impact is asking at any financial institution, is what is the next financed emissions target going to be? Like, what are the 3 or 4 targets going to be for nature? I think that inevitably we're going to have some around land use, some around water, water withdrawals, water pollution, and then probably something around nutrients and number of invasive species events. So that's where we're headed. But what are some of the interim steps to getting there? Things that many of you will have already done. You'll have targets for the number of companies you engage with on particular topics. That's a target. We can do that right now. You'll have a target about, again, returning to deforestation, a target about the percentage of deforestation and conversion-free commodities that are sourced by companies in certain sectors. That's a response-based metric. You're expecting those companies to reach that level by a certain point. So before we even get to financed emissions, but for nature, there are these response-based targets, engagement-based targets, and then indeed financing-based targets. Do you want to have a specific mobilization or allocation target that we can already use today, based upon some of the actions that have been raised on the panel? So lots of types of targets, but lots of things that financial institutions can work on before consensus emerges about these portfolio-wide pressure-based metrics. Last thing from me on that, so science-based target network, it got mentioned. There's the land-based targets, there's the water-based targets. This is where I have to remind myself to speak slower because in January they will be putting out for consultation their guidance for the financial sector. So that's the current estimate that I've heard. So keep an eye out for that, because that theoretically becomes the guide against which financial institutions start to look to set some of the targets that I've mentioned.
Thank you. If I had so much time, I could just dive into this key question on the relation between pressure targets and then impact on biodiversity, because it's key to keep on track an eye on where, I have a target on land use, I have a target on water consumption, but in the end, what is my target on impact reductions? What is my target? How it's linked to make sure that we are on the right track for our planetary boundaries, all these reach targets. I think it's good for now. We had some really fruitful discussions, so thank you a lot to all my panelists. So a round of applause for them. So thank you very much. It was really interesting. Thank you all for being here. Thank you also to Natixis for organizing, and Gracien, who was there to organize this whole roundtable. So thank you so much. And that's pretty much all. You have some questions? Okay, so I'm being told now if we have some questions. So if you have one or two questions, I can give you the microphone.
I don't know if there are any other questions, but I can think of several. But thank you for a very good discussion. I just want to ask, in the mining and agriculture sectors, right? To what extent are you able to get a premium for the end product when you sell it to customers for improvements in biodiversity? We all know about organic agriculture, for example, but that's one standard. On the way to that, are there, can you get a premium? And the same for metals.
Excellent question. I wish. Honestly, not at scale. So this is something you could maybe have for a niche brand with a very specific type of customers. But today we're not able yet to crack that model of having a premium for this product. It's more that it's expected as standard price. And so what I hear consumers, because it's not my direct field, but what I hear consumers are asking from the company would be to have a product with superior functionalities, superior tests, superior health functionalities, and making sure that it's ethically, responsibly, environmentally friendly sourced. And that's what we hear more from consumers. That being said, what we're really exploring as we speak is more the conversation with customers and the retailers, because that's a whole other conversation. We're not B2C anymore, we're B2B. Business to business, you can have a conversation about value creation that is very different from the conversation on the business to consumer as a conversation.
Yes, for metals, we actually we don't go with premium. The idea, so as I mentioned, is to go with best practice, and we choose IRMA. So this is a very important and strategic point for Eramet. And the way we want to benefit from that engagement, in addition to the transparency it's providing, is to partner on a specific project with the value chain. For now, that's the way we have done.
Very, very quickly on the mining point. So on the ground, practice for mining has always, they've been the leaders in terms of avoiding harm to nature and best practice. But in terms of traceability, like tracing the minerals back to the mine site, it's way behind where agricultural commodities are. And actually, so we don't know what the price signal could be. So an example of somebody that recognizes this opportunity is Volvo, who created an entirely segregated blockchain for the minerals in the batteries that are going in their new EX90, so the super high best practice sustainability claims SUV they're making, because they want to make that claim about the way that the minerals were mined and that those minerals were mined in as sustainable a way as possible. So we don't have a price signal on mining quite yet. But
okay, thank you. We don't have time for more questions, but we're going to be around, at least for me, for a few minutes, so we can also keep discussing informally. Thank you again for being here and to assist this panel.
Thanks, Arthur.